You are listening to From Ring to Veil.
I'm Shannon.
And I'm Kim.
And we are your wedding planning gurus.
We take the stress out
and put the fun back into wedding planning. Rings, top trends, styles, and how much. Episode number 178.
If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to podcasts. And that could be Google Podcasts now.
Join our Facebook group, From Ring to Veil Wedding Planning Community. Answer the questions. Because if you don't answer the questions,
we can't let you in.
Yeah, we can't let you in. Because we're trying to keep it sell free. Just advice.
If you haven't looked into it yet and you're getting married here in the Seattle area, check out our Seattle metro area wedding planning resource guide. We have it in two versions, a paperback and a Kindle. You can find those at fromringtoveil.com/RG paperback or fromringtoveil.com/RG Kindle. The links are right there in the show notes. If you want to go to the website, it's fromringtoveil.com/178, or it should be right there in your podcast app. Please let us know what you think. If you've purchased it, send us a picture or post a picture on social media and hashtag FRTVRG, and we'll send you some fun stuff.
So Kim got to interview Mr. Steve Simon from MySparkly.com. He is the CEO and co-founder of Sparkly. We talked engagement rings, or Kim talked engagement rings with him.
You can say we, that's fine. You obviously love listening to podcasts. Well, have you tried an audiobook? Hi, I'm Kim, and I am an audiobook listener. It's actually my preferred way to, quote unquote, read. And if you haven't tried listening to one yet, go to www.fromringtoveil.com/freebook to get a free audiobook from Audible. I may have just given you your new obsession. Welcome, Steve, to the show. We are so glad you're here. We've been wanting to talk about wedding rings, but we don't have all that much experience in it, and we are glad to have you, to have found you an expert on these wedding rings.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So we want to start out with you telling us about your story. How did you become an expert on wedding rings, and what led you here?
Sure. So I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. I would say it started with me selling Disneyland posters when I was a kid and kind of catching the bug that way. And eventually, as the internet progressed, I loved finding ways to make life easier by finding shortcuts and loopholes and just making things easier for various different things. And whenever I have my own project, I'm always thinking about ways I can improve it, and sometimes even how you could turn it into a business. And I would say the path that ultimately got me started with becoming an expert in engagement rings is when I went to search for engagement rings for my now wife. It honestly originated out of my own love story where I was looking for engagement rings for her, and I became so confused and overwhelmed by all the options. I eventually asked her for some help in terms of like figuring out what type of ring she wanted. And what was funny is that even after she became involved, we quickly realized that she didn't even know what she liked, even though she's browsed through tons of photos. And since we were looking for the ring together, what we ultimately found helpful were these ring selfies because they provided a lot of context. You know, a lot of the engagement ring photos online are stock images, so it's really hard to get an idea of how big the ring looks or how it interacts with certain hands or fingers. And that's why we loved the ring selfies. And obviously there's a ton of ring selfies out there, but what we found is that it took us a lot of effort to find the ones that really help you. To find one that matches the diamond shape you want or the size, etc. And we realized that there's probably a lot of other couples out there having similar struggles. So we wanted to apply the same type of search functionality when you're shopping for a ring to browsing these ring selfies to help you visually learn about what you like. And just by building mysparkly.com from the ground up and probably seeing more ring selfies than anybody, ultimately allowed me to visually learn about different aspects of a ring and how it changes things like price. And hopefully that's something that mysparkly.com can eventually do for users as well. That's our ultimate goal.
That's awesome. I could tell you're a little bit of an entrepreneur at heart there when I was reading the stories about how it came to happen and how you developed this website, and even looking through the website, I thought, what a neat concept that you have. So explain a little bit about what My Sparkly is and why our listeners will love it.
Sure. So mysparkly.com is hopefully going to be the new hub for all things engagement rings. And it's ultimately there to help people learn about and find inspiration for their future engagement rings. And you can almost think of it like a Pinterest, but it's specifically made for engagement rings. Mm-hmm. And what makes it so unique is that every single one of our thousands of photos is of a real ring on a real person's hand, which we obviously call ring selfies. And this really allows you to see what different rings look like on similar hands, such as yours. And more importantly, we're showing specs on every single image, such as carat size or ring size of the person wearing it. So that way both men and women can easily search for and better understand what they like in a ring.
That's such a great idea, because you're right. It's so confusing. And even now, every year they probably come out with something new. So there's just more and more and more and more. And they have all the vintage styles and all the new styles and new types. It is so confusing.
Yeah, there's just so many different things that go into choosing an engagement ring. And that's the problem we found, is that we'd be searching on Pinterest and we'd see this beautiful ring selfie. And my wife would say, oh, I love that one. But we're like, okay, I kind of understand the shape, but what type of style is that? How big is it? And that's what we found was missing from this space, and ultimately what we were trying to do.
Good job with coming up with such an awesome idea. Kudos to you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, so you are an expert on wedding rings. You've seen a million of them. What are the top 3 styles right now?
Across the board, solitaire is the most popular style. It's been that way for a long time, and I think it's just because it's classy and elegant, and it's not going to go out of style. We see people search for solitaire rings probably twice as much as the next search for style. And the nice thing about solitaires is that it really features the diamond itself. So if you're spending all of this time and money selecting a diamond, most people want to feature that diamond and not have anything that takes away from it. And I think that's the reason why solitaires are so popular. The second would be halo rings. We've seen an uptrend in halos over the past few years, and this is just because it could be a really great complement to the center stone, and it can even make the ring look bigger. Oh. Some of my favorite rings out there are ones with halos, just because I think if you get it right, it can just look absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. But everyone has their own reason for choosing it. I have heard multiple people tell me that they chose a halo because they wanted it to look bigger, and it's sometimes hard to tell what size the center stone is when you have a halo, because it makes it look significantly bigger.
And so explain what a halo is.
Sure. So a halo are just tiny diamonds around the big diamond. So it's literally just a tiny diamond halo around the main diamond. And some people even do a double or triple halo where they have multiple rings around it. So just something that's been pretty popular lately. And then I would say the third most popular style at the moment, it's 3-stone rings. And we think that that's because of the royal engagement. And ever since that point, 3 stones just started surging in popularity. Who knows how long that will last, but I would say a part of the larger trend is that vintage styles are becoming more popular. So just styles that are a little bit more intricate with more detail, and it looks like something maybe from the 20s or 30s. And again, we've just seen some beautiful rings out there with that type of styling.
So does it seem to do that when there's a very high profile wedding and the ring is finally shown? Does that kind of put an uptick on those types?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at the same time, still solitaires and halos are more popular, because I don't know if people want to make a lifelong decision based on a moment in time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just like mysparkly.com might inspire somebody, the royal couple could have inspired people to start saying, oh, I never thought about 3 rings. 3 rings, beautiful. So maybe I should consider it. So yeah, we definitely do see an uptick in search activity just based on trends.
Okay. I'm always interested in that kind of thing. If like say wedding dresses too, are they all of a sudden going to be all like the royal wedding, or stuff like that? So
absolutely, I think it's like anything else, where when a celebrity is rocking something, people want to copy them in a sense. I would say the only difference between dresses and engagement rings is that you're stuck with it for the rest of your life. So if you're like, oh man, I made a decision based off of the royal wedding and now I don't like it, you might regret it.
That's for sure. Let's get into your top tips for selecting the perfect ring. I can't even imagine how hard this is for men, especially if they don't have the input of the person that they're buying for.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting these days is that nearly 70% of women are involved in the engagement ring in some way. So it's not like the good old days where you had the cliche engagement ring where she's completely surprised and didn't see it coming. A lot of people, including myself, get the woman involved pretty early on. And that's just because they want to get them something that they're going to love for the rest of their life. So they'd rather risk not having as big of a surprise, but instead getting something that they're going to like. So yeah, it is especially hard if you do want to do it yourself without the girl's help. But at the same time, yeah, there's a handful of different tips. So I would say the first thing, and it's pretty straightforward, is just before you even start looking at an engagement ring, determine what's the most important thing to you and why. So for example, do you care more about the size of the stone or the quality or the style of it? If you really have an idea of that before you even step foot into a jewelry store or a online shopping site, that's really going to guide you in the right direction, because at least you have some direction. The second tip I would say is consider choosing your style first. So obviously a lot of people choose the diamond itself and then choose the style. But what I've heard a handful of times is that by the time they get to the point that they've chosen the diamond and it's time to choose the style, they're out of budget, and then they need to have some sacrifices on the style. So if you decide on the style first and kind of have an idea of what something like that's going to cost, that's a good way of ensuring you get the style you want. And that way the style is influencing the diamond you choose instead of the diamond influencing the style you choose.
That's a great tip. I love that.
And then if you want to save money on a diamond, I would consider going slightly lower in carat size. So for example, you could do a 0.9 carat stone instead of a 1 carat stone, or a 1.4 instead of a 1.5. And doing that actually saves you a lot of money, because you're not really hitting the carat milestones per se, but at the same time, the difference is just so minor. I can almost guarantee you and most people would never be able to tell the difference.
That's crazy.
And again, that's why I found the ring selfie so helpful, and what we're looking for My Sparkly to do for users, because you can actually say, okay, I wonder what a 0.9 carat round stone looks like on my ring size.
Yeah.
Then you can change it to a 1 carat and see if you can really tell a difference. And I can almost guarantee you won't. So in that case, if you're looking to save some money, go with the smaller size.
That is a great tip. And is it significantly more savings, or is it just a little bit of savings?
I think it really varies.
Okay.
So it just depends on so many different aspects of the stone. But it can be significant. I mean, especially, if you're going higher up in carat size, such as like 2 carat or 2.5 carat, that it can make a big difference in price, because ultimately what happened is that the diamond cutter was hoping to get a 2.5 carat stone out of this rough diamond. And after cutting it, it came out to 2.4. And that doesn't excite people who have their heart set on a 2.5 or larger carat diamonds. They have to kind of take a hit to sell it. So yeah, it's I think that's a good tip to save some money. And likewise, for the fourth tip, I would say is that you can save a ton on a ring if you go down in clarity, but make sure the diamond is eye clean. So a lot of people really care about clarity because they think it's about, how much light goes through the stone in a sense. But a lot of times what it is they're just very small imperfections in the diamond. And the only way you can see it is with intense magnification. So ultimately that's what I did for my wife's ring. I went down to the lowest clarity possible without being able to see it with the naked eye. And while we were in the jewelry store, we could look under intense magnification and see those blemishes. But since that point, you would never know it's there. We don't really have a loupe in our house to look at it or care. So it's something that actually saves a lot of money. That being said, it's typically better to do that with the brilliant diamonds, meaning like the round diamonds or the cushion diamonds that sparkle versus an emerald, because an emerald is like a beautiful clear ice cube. So in that case, the inclusions can be a little bit more visible to the naked eye. So be careful with that. But I highly encourage asking jewelers for a low clarity with the diamond still being eye clean.
Okay.
And then I would say my last tip is that at the end of the day, the quality of the cut is probably the most important thing, because this is what ultimately causes the diamond to reflect all this beautiful light upwards and make it sparkle. And obviously, a sparkly ring looks amazing, but it also does things such as hide the inclusions for clarity, like I just talked about, or it could even make a stone that's slightly more yellow look less yellow because it's reflecting all of this beautiful white light. So we say that it faces up a lot whiter than the color grade suggests, if that makes sense. So just to make sure you get a stone that's cut very well.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I remember when I got mine, 20 something years ago, he showed us a couple of those little things inside my ring, but you can't tell just by looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember somebody told me that, the higher, better clarity also means that it's just more rare. And that's why it's super expensive as well. So it has nothing to do with the way that the diamond looks all the time, but it's more expensive simply because it's rare to find a natural diamond, made in the ground that doesn't have any inclusion. So that's important to some people though too. Some people just like knowing that their diamond is as clear as can be, and it's all up to personal preference.
That's exactly right. Personal preference, I think, is you hit it right there. So there's engagement rings and there's wedding rings. Let's talk about how much somebody can budget or expect to pay for an engagement ring on average.
I think the last I read, the average price for engagement rings was about $6,500. It really varies depending on the state or city. I know that California and New York skew slightly higher, but overall, I would say the average is $6,500. Again, how much you want to spend on an engagement ring is personal preference, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It really comes down to the person you're giving it to as well. I know some people get their engagement rings and they never really want to wear it that much because they find it clunky or it interferes with their everyday life. And if that's the type of person you're giving it to, then it's probably not worth spending a ton. If it's somebody who says, yeah, I want to get this engagement ring and I'm going to wear it for the rest of my life, then it's maybe more appropriate to make the investment because, again, it's something that they're going to enjoy for the rest of their life. And I would say that's kind of more the route I took with my wife, where she was so excited about her engagement ring and she said how she was going to wear it forever. And so I figured it would be a good investment. And I remember when I was at the jewelry store, the jeweler was giving me a whole spiel, and he was showing me the diamond saying, your wife's going to look down at this and see it sparkle and think about you. And I remember sitting there saying, oh man, this guy's really giving me the sales spiel. This is like ridiculous. But, now that I've been engaged and married for years, my wife does tell me, she says, I look at this almost every day, and think about us and our engagement and that day and everything. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe the jeweler was right.
He is. Yes, we do that.
Yeah, I guess so. And then for wedding rings, again, I would say this is similar to what I mentioned about consider choosing your style first, because the wedding band is often an afterthought to the engagement ring. And by the time you get around to it, you may have already used up all your budget and you need to settle for a wedding band. So consider that just in the back of your mind when you're choosing your engagement ring. And also, if you're the type of person that I mentioned where you're not really interested in wearing an engagement ring 24/7, for the rest of your life, then maybe it's worth spending a little less on the engagement ring and more on the wedding ring that you'll wear forever.
When you're budgeting for your wedding rings should be part of your budget. But the engagement ring is really not part of the wedding budget. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair choice. I mean, by the time you're selecting your wedding ring, you are making arrangements for the wedding, so it definitely can come out of that budget.
Shannon and I have sort of different views. I think you can. She thinks anyway. I just wanted to see what the expert says.
Yeah, again, I think it just varies. I mean, just the way I budgeted, I had a fund for the engagement ring and wedding band, but I can definitely see how if you're 3 or 4 months away from the wedding, where it'll come out of that budget.
Gotcha. And how much can you budget for just the wedding bands? I guess it would be not necessarily the whole engagement ring with the band and all that, but for him and for her, what would you say the average is for wedding bands?
Again, it really varies. I mean, we've seen some interesting trends with wedding bands. I think for women, the popular thing right now are the infinity bands, meaning that there's diamonds all the way around.
Oh.
So in that case, you probably need to allocate, I don't know, maybe $1,000 or $1,500, depending on what you want. For men, it really varies. Recently, I have been seeing yellow gold making a comeback, and more men are doing that. But at the same time, I was just at a bachelor party in Denver, and literally every person from Denver had one of those silicone wedding rings. And those are $5 or $20. So again, I can say, allocate $1,000 or $1,500 toward your wedding band, but these guys would just, they're more than happy just sporting that every day, and I'm sure they find it comfortable, and they didn't spend more than $50.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah, I personally like the precious metal, but to each their own.
Exactly. And I'm just going to ask you, have you heard of the engagement ring?
I have. I've been hearing a little bit more about it. I'm not sure it's a super normal thing at this point, just because nobody within my inner circle has done it, but I have been reading that it's happening more and more. And, I think that's a fun thing too. Why not? Exactly.
So we've talked about styles. We've talked about how to select, and you gave us some great tips. We talked a little bit about budgeting. Is there anything else that you can think of that would be a golden nugget for our listeners?
Not necessarily. I would say just do as much research as possible, and just really think about what's important to you. Because again, all of my tips really come down to personal preference. If you're trying to save money, there's a bunch of different things you can do to do so. But if you care about just the quality and all that stuff, that's totally fine too. But that's why it's just super important to go into it knowing what you want. Just because then you're not really forced to make decisions at the jewelry store or under a time crunch. You really have a good plan. And I would say the last snippet is that even if you're shopping for rings locally, if you go to a local jeweler, a lot of times their inventory is limited. So you might say you want a 1.5 carat cushion stone, and you get to their store and they don't have that, and they need to bring it in. And that's really something we're looking to do with My Sparkly, where we're also helping people when they're in the jewelry store, in a sense, where if the jeweler doesn't have the exact diamond that they're looking for, they can kind of go on together and start looking at what they like and working with the jeweler and getting inspiration that way. That way, you don't necessarily need to go from jewelry store to see how the exact diamond's going to look. So it's a good use case for our site as well.
Right. Exactly. So then, like you said, you could look at that style that cut on a real person's hand that might have the same skin tone as you, and you could see what it looks like.
Yeah, exactly. And also, you can definitely save money buying rings online. We encourage it. We think just, do your research, and some online jewelers have free returns, free shipping, free upgrades. So there's a lot of benefits to shopping online. I would say the only disadvantage is a lot of them don't necessarily have pictures of the actual diamond. And then if they do, a lot of times they're so zoomed in and close up, it's hard to really tell the difference. I've shown some friends on a certain site, they show a really beautiful close-up of all their diamonds, but a 0.5 carat stone looks exactly the same as a 5 carat stone, and the difference in price is only about $140,000. So we're also hoping that our site is a tool to help you with that type of decision making, where you're saying, okay, I'm looking at these two rings on this site. One's 0.7, one's 1.2. Well, how's it actually going to look on my ring size? And again, that's where you can go back and check with our site. Yeah, I would say those are most of the tips I have for today.
So I do have a question. So from your site, if I see a ring that I like and I'm interested in purchasing that, is there a link to where that ring was purchased or anything like that?
So sure, that's ultimately our goal at this site. Is we want it to benefit both consumers and jewelers. I originally built the site for consumers to get inspiration and information about rings, but our response from jewelers has been overwhelmingly great as well. And that's something that we're looking to do and we're working on at the moment, where if you see a ring where you say, oh my God, this is beautiful, I have to have it, you're going to be able to contact the jeweler who made it and go from there. And we do have a button right now that we actually just started in a very early beta, and it's Shop This Look. So if you see a picture, you can push it. We're just running a couple of tests right now, but we do have some fun stuff coming that's going to be more along the lines of what I just discussed, where when you see something that you love, we'll put you in touch with either the jeweler who can make it or another jeweler more local to you who can help make something similar.
That's great. I love that. Well, thank you, Steve, for coming. I would love for you to share where our listeners can find you.
Sure. Yeah. No, thanks for having me. This is super fun. And our site is called Sparkly, and the website is mysparkly.com. They can also find us on Instagram. We're posting tons of pictures on there and have a pretty good following and lots of fun content every day. And it's at mysparkly. And
if they want to email or contact you, where would they do that?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great point. We love any and all feedback and any suggestions. So feel free to email me at steve@mysparkly.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, I'm sorry I kept saying wedding rings, you guys. I know they're engagement rings. I just, for some reason, it was just like wedding rings in my mind. So I'm sorry for that. But I did think he gave us a lot of good information and some really cool ideas. And I even think the website's such a neat idea. I mean, what if we had that back when we were getting married? I mean, how nice would it have been to favorited some stuff and said, hey, honey, this is what I like.
So he gave some great tips,
He really did.
I like the tips that you can go down a point carat size down, and it'll significantly, or not as significant, but lower the price of the gem. So I thought that was kind of cool. I never would have thought about that.
I wouldn't have either.
Because you don't go in there and say, I want a 1.3 carat diamond,
But you can.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that you could.
Are you really going to know the difference if they say, yeah, this is a quarter, this is a carat and a half? Are you going to know the difference?
No, I wouldn't. That was really good. Thank you, Steve. I love your last name. My son's name is Simon. So, yeah. Thank you, Steve, for those awesome diamond nuggets. They're not just golden, they're diamond. We are so glad that you were on the show and helped us with this because, like you just said, we had no idea about this kind of stuff. So it's always awesome to have somebody who knows what they're talking about on the show. And not only do our listeners get to learn, but we get to learn too. So
we have a question from our group. So if you join our group, you get to post questions to our professionals on there that we have on there. We love our professionals on our board. And they answer questions really, they're very educated in what they do. And so they answer your questions. They have been thoroughly researched.
That's right. And experienced.
Right. That's the word I was looking for, but it didn't come out. I'm like, no, I don't know. Anyway, so this is from the group. If the mother of the groom wishes to give a toast, where would she go? I know it should be best man, maid of honor, father of the bride, father of the groom, bride and groom. Based on your episode 130, where would she fit in that order, please?
So one of our Hall of Famers, Alan, Puget Sound DJ, he had a response for her, which his stuff is gold. I find a good flow is to have the couple come in for their grand entrance and thank everybody right then. It's a great transition from guest applauding and then going to dinner. And he talks a little bit more about this in the previous episode we had him on about receptions, which was episode 175. There's a link in the show notes there for you. And then he goes on to say, and for actual toast, I usually recommend starting with the oldest generation first. I usually start with the parents of the bride and then the parents of the groom. Even if only one parent is going to speak, I like encouraging both to go up at the same time, as it makes for a nice moment and a nice photo, which makes sense. And they're there in solidarity supporting their children.
Then he goes, I would usually put other older generation folks, aunts, uncles, and grandparents, etc. I think that would get too long, though.
I mean, it could. I guess whoever wants to speak.
Yeah. Then I would put peer and members of the wedding party. Then I would have maid of honor and best man. I mean, if my advice, if you have a wedding party of like 10 people on each side, they don't need to speak. That's just too much. Because, people get tired of listening to people talk all the time. At least I do.
That is true. And with our short attention span. Spans.
Span. It's just span. It's not expand.
It expands.
Our short attention spans. Know. Yeah, anyway.
There you go.
And Alan goes on to say, part of the reason that I like it this way is that the flow starts broad. Parents are very welcoming and can talk about their kids' whole life. That would be too long for me. But then
pull up the slideshow. Yeah. Okay, this is when they took his first bath.
Here's her bare butt on a blanket. Anyway, but then as you move through peers and maid of honor, best man, you start to hear more about them and their relationship. I guess that's true, but that's still a lot of people.
That is a lot of people. And then again, you have to know who you're talking to in your group and your people and who all's in your, and not everybody's going to want to do a toast. Yeah. I can tell you that much because I know Shannon's not going to want to do a toast.
I'm like, congrats, drink. That's
now,
me.
If she was in a booth somewhere behind closed doors talking into a microphone, then maybe, but not up in front of anybody.
As long as I don't have to see faces, I'm fine.
No, but so this here just shows you that there's a couple of different ways to do it, because in our show 130, we laid out a plan where Alan has come up with his own different way of doing things. So you can take it to and take each one of them and figure out which exactly is the way that you want it to flow. Now, if you're going by what we have on number 130, you said best man, maid of honor, father of the bride, mother of the bride, mother of the groom, father of the groom. So you can put them together, father of the bride and mother of the bride. And then next you do father of the groom and mother of the groom. So it just kind of depends on which way you want it to flow. It's not going to be wrong wherever you do it.
And, I like the bride and groom at the end because, there's kind of a thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing this day. That's my opinion. But
right. So that way it gives people kind of a closure in a way if they want to leave before the dancing starts. Now, Alan wants the people not to leave, right? We're trying to keep those people there to dance and party all night long or until 9:30 or whenever the end time is. So that you also have to look at. Are you wanting to release people and letting them say, okay, we love you. Thank you for coming. You may go now. And the partiers stay, or do you want to try to keep everybody there? So you just got to look at it like that and make your decision on how you want it to be.
Yeah. So that's really all we have for you today. Again, we thank Steve for talking about engagement rings because I know nothing about them. I know what I like.
Yes.
But I couldn't tell you cut, clarity, and, whatever the 3 C's
Right.
are. Carat, cut, and clarity. I don't know.
For a vow renewal, would you get a new ring? Maybe a ring for the other hand?
I don't know.
Because I might just start favoriting up some stuff on my sparkly.
I told Jeremy what I wanted for our 25th anniversary, and I told him because my engagement ring and wedding ring got stolen a long, long time ago. So I don't have my original. I wear one my grandmother gave to me.
Oh.
So it's a vintage style ring, and I really love it. It's an oval shape, and it has, like the halo, it has lots of little diamonds and a large diamond in the center. And I love it, but I want something different now. I want a 3-stone ring with a diamond in the middle and sapphires, because my birthday's in September, and I want sapphires in there. So I've been favoriting a lot of sapphire and diamond rings. I'm like, oh, look, Jay, here.
Get on my sparkly, and you can tell him specifically what you want and where to buy it. We still have our wedding timelines and checklists up for sale, up for grabs from ringdeville.com/checklists. It's $2.99, 20 plus pages. If you have friends getting married, let them know, because we think this is going to be a really good way to help you get everything in order and keep on track and help you plan without so much of the stress.
And as you can see, this question came from our Facebook group. So please join our Facebook group and ask questions, and they might get on the show, and you'll get your answer on the Facebook group and on the show.
That's right. That's right. I mean, this was such a good question. We had to put it on the show. I mean, we know there's probably people thinking the same thing. Mm-hmm. Don't forget, subscribe to the podcast. We're everywhere. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Alexa, CastBox, and now Google Podcasts. Woohoo! I'm so excited about that.
And until next time, no stress, no worries. Keep calm and listen on.
Music provided by bensound.com.